much for coming to our panel. I am so sorry. We're having some pretty major technical difficulties. So we're just going to skip the talk part of it right now. And until we get the technical difficulties fixed, please line up at our microphone. And we will start with Q&A, which is kind of a new thing. So this is Cady Coleman. She is an amazing person. I love her so hard. I got to drive her in my car this morning, and I'm going to tell a story I told earlier today, but I don't think these folks were here. So we're coming back from Starbucks. We're getting ready to get in the car because we got there a little early so that we could get, into the line and everything. We walked past the City of Atlanta sanitation folks. She wanted to stop and thank them for the hard job that they do of cleaning up after the parade. She said, I need to thank them. And I said, I need to thank them too. And so we went over there and we talked to them, and I introduced her, and I said, this is an honest-to-goodness astronaut. This is not cosplay. This is her actual work clothes. The first question that one of the guys asked was, is the Earth round? I loved that. I loved that. That was his first question. And then the second question was, are there aliens? So she had a long talk with them. She showed her videos, showed her pictures, because they're all like, you ain't no astronaut. And then she showed evidence, and they were like, all right, that's pretty cool. And so they all wanted photos with her, so we've got this amazing photograph. We had a wonderful experience this morning. So, okay, that was weird. But anyway, so what we'll do is we'll start with the Q&A. I see our line here. Please don't touch the mic. And go.
This is a great question. I wondered if it's a problem in when people have long hair on the space station. And the answer is it depends where you are and what you're doing. When everybody's trying to work like in the cupola or be in the cupola to see something, then my big giant hair is definitely in the way, and I tie it up. But the story behind my hair being out is on the shuttle there was sort of an unspoken but very clear rule that thou shalt not have their hair big and bad in space except in a single photo that you take for your friends and family. Okay? And in the shuttle, it is a closer work environment, so that a lot more of that close kind of time does apply, right? But by the time I got to when I was up on the shuttle with Eileen Collins, she's the first woman commander, and we were going to do a press thing, and my hair had been like out and loose because it was just drying, and I actually had like a ton of hair, and it could take 3 days to dry if you tie it up, right? And so I was like, Eileen, she said, you should just like leave your hair out so that people know we're in space. I said, Eileen, we're not supposed to have our hair out, on TV and stuff. And she was like, and the commander of this space shuttle would be? So, and it gave me this, this idea that, it really matters what people see. Sorry about that. And so anyways, when I got to knowing that I was going to go to the space station, I wanted to get my crew portrait taken in the EVA, the spacewalking suit, because if you train in it and you're assigned to a mission, and it's just such a big deal, you get to actually get your portrait taken in that big suit. And so my mom told me that this is going to be the forever picture, right, for even when I'm like old, like now, and you want to look like your forever picture. She goes, you're going to have short hair by the time you're like old, so get that picture taken with short hair. So I did that. And then that day after that picture, I let it grow so that when I got to space, I would have this like bigger hair. Because on the space station, nobody seemed to remember that there was a rule, and there's really not that many people around to talk to you all the time. So you see a lot of big hair pictures, and it's my subliminal way of having people see video and pictures. And it's just kind of this little thing that just kind of says, hey, yeah, somebody like you belongs here. Just like a very matter-of-fact way of saying that. Next.
Hi there. So this is my first time at the Skepticism track, so if I've got the vibe wrong, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, they're very welcome.
All right, so my question is...
And they welcome really all questions,
yeah.
Right?
All right, then. My question is basically, with the rise in, science denialism and things like people denying climate change, vaccines, all kinds of science, what do you think is the real-world harm and danger of that sort of, allowing that sort of stuff to like
Keep
have
going.
there, and yeah, and what do you think it maybe poses for the future in terms of the space program and things like that?
Well, I think it's a huge danger, and it's. I think all we can do is try to tell stories in a way that they can be heard, right? To change that and to make it different. There's somebody that I know that lives in our town, and we work together, and they were, candidly not a fan of being vaccinated, and very firm about that. And I said, tell me why. Like, and she said, well, I read all these things about how terrible it is to get vaccinated. And I said, well, can I see your phone? Can I see what you read? And what I saw was an article that said in very easy to read words that it was dangerous to do that. And then below that were a bunch of really nice headshots of people that, men, women, people of color. I mean, it was, and then they all they worked at, or their biography said they came from, different places, the institute of this or that. And when you look at it, I was like, well, it seems like that's respectable, and I better go look these people up. And when you go that level deeper, you might find that those institutes don't exist, right? Or that they're, they're not really places of study that is studying in a sort of unbiased way. Anyways, but I was like, wow, no wonder she thinks that, because that's all she sees at home. And so I think DragonCon is actually a great way to really. This is looking very promising here. Maybe I shouldn't have said that, but that there's a lot of cool storytelling here, and people are telling stories with the way they dress and what message they're trying to send with their costumes. And so I think telling stories is the only both way to subvert that and also have revenge. Go ahead.
So my question to you is,
I'm listening.
yeah,
I'm listening.
there are over 1 trillion confirmed galaxies. Each of those galaxies have hundreds of billions of stars. Each of those stars have many, many, many planets. And so statistically speaking, there should be alien life forms everywhere, like regardless of where we look. But for whatever reason, our scientists haven't been able to find them. So some people speculate that intelligent life inevitably self-destructs. Other people think that intelligent life, if they're intelligent, they're going to hide themselves from other intelligent life forms. And there's various theories as to why this is the case. So as a self-described space skeptic, I was kind of curious what your take on that was.
Well, I think those are all good points, and those are all things that could be happening. That could be why we haven't actually seen that kind of evidence. And the fact that when we find evidence of life, it's probably not going to be cute. And it's not going to be the most popular costume here, right? But it's going to be interesting and profound, I think. And so all I can say is that we just keep looking, and I like the fact that people look in different ways. The search for intelligent life in the universe, where they're looking at, is there ways that people can show that they are kind of thinking and smart and creative and trying to tell us something. I think that's a really smart way to look at things. And I think having crowdsourcing of data, all the numbers you said at the beginning, the amount of data is huge. And so crowdsourcing and finding a way to popularize some really good surveys is a really good thing. And we've thought about this in terms of asteroids, where the danger of asteroids is actually huge, right? This is something that happens every certain amount of time, and it doesn't mean it's going to wait another 150 years or a million years or whatever. So, and actually, if we could just understand what is coming, we could perhaps make a solution. The fact as an astronaut, I'm a member of the Association of Space Explorers, and we take on some causes that we think we might have a unique point of view about. And one of those is asteroids and understanding more about them. And NASA actually made an asteroid, like a game, kind of like Candy Crush, but where you're actually, zapping or doing whatever with asteroids. And it was the person who is speaking from the game is an astronaut. There's an asteroid scientist. And if you get to a certain level, then you get to actually analyze NASA data and say, does this look like this curve, this curve, this curve? And it's interesting to me what it takes to make an idea like that, which is very, it could be very powerful if it worked, right? But it has to be a really good game, and it has to be, and you want to make sure that the person who's narrating and people that are relating to want to take advantage of the fact that that could be somebody that doesn't look like our traditional commanders back in the 1960s, right? And it was this experiment actually failed, mostly because I forget what. It was one of the phone companies that was actually initially invested, and then the champion that championed the game left the company, and then you have to find another, champion. What's that? Oh, they're talking. Okay. Anyways, and so I think things like that. I mean, and even this thing was designed by the World of Warfare, but I gave it to my kid, and he's like, Mom, it's like, slow, it's hard to do. I think the iPhone got new platforms in that amount of time, and so then it didn't really work right. So realize that you can have really good ideas and just stick with them and overcome these obstacles, because there may be obstacles, but I think this kind of idea of crowdsourcing is really a good one. Next.
Question. Could you speak to the complications with Starliner and the 2 astronauts that are currently stranded on the ISS? And would there be any kind of physiological consequences when a mission gets unexpectedly extended like that?
I'm glad, because I really wanted to go over this during the talk anyway. Can I help you, or you're just good? He's good. Okay. It's been, I think it's I said this to the space group earlier today. This is a really interesting exercise in thinking about what you hear on the news and what you're not hearing and why it's different. And like this word stranded should be banned, okay? Because they are not stranded. They could always come home. I do commentary quite a bit for ABC, and I spoke with the person that I usually work with, the producer that I work with, and I'm like, do you just not want to tell them that actually, this is just a normal part of like test stuff. They're gathering good data. It would actually be stupid to be intimidated by the media and turn around and come home sooner just because everybody's worried for reasons that are not valid. And she just said, Cady, I give them all the facts that you're talking about, and they have them, but the word stranded makes people watch the news. And as much as I love this station, they are on the stranded boat, so to speak. The other thing I thought that I found that was interesting is, so I'm listening to all the NASA press conferences, and in a press conference that I listened to, they said, the first time they said it, they go, we're pretty sure that we're going to be able to bring Butch and Sunny home on the Boeing. But if we can't, we're getting into the window where we have to have prepared our alternate mechanisms. And one of those is that we would take 2 people off the next mission, send that ship up anyway, and then Butch and Sunny would come home with them, but not until February of 2025. And then there were the headlines, Butch and Sunny not coming home until 2025. And I'm like, did I miss something? But so there's the news part of it. But in reality, it's complicated and it's hard. They had issues. The Boeing spacecraft is a really capable spacecraft. It has a lot more capability for manual control than SpaceX. And that doesn't mean that SpaceX hasn't thought of a lot of things. Really a ton of things, and it's being a really great automatic spacecraft. But it's nice to have 2 different ways. It's imperative to have 2 different ways up to space. And that's why, they're really trying to make sure this Boeing one works out as a way to do that. And the good news is they have figured out what has been happening with the thrusters. These are the things that move the spacecraft when you want to dock and you want to be all lined up. Well, it's the same thing when you undock. That's actually not so hard. But when you're going to do the deorbit burn, which means that you're going to turn the spacecraft around, you're going to fire your engines into the wind, so to speak, into the direction you're traveling, so that you slow down. And for the shuttle, I'll give you the numbers, I don't know them for Boeing, but for the shuttle, it's like 17,500 miles an hour is what we're doing. And then we have to slow down by 300 miles an hour. And that means 70,200 miles an hour. And by just slowing down, so that's really a small percentage of the speed, right? 300 miles an hour is like nothing. So it has to be really precise, because what it means is when you slow down that 300 miles an hour, you are going to actually start falling out of orbit because you're not going fast enough, and you're going to land halfway around the Earth. And if you have to point it the right way, and you have to do it at the right place, the right time, and exactly the right amount. or be able to correct for it in real time. And so they didn't have that confidence in the Boeing. They understand what's happening, but they don't understand how they can make sure it's not going to happen at just the wrong time for the way home. And so it was actually a pretty black and white question. Is it safer for Butch and Cady to come home on something else or on the Boeing? And the answer was on something else. And the part that they don't talk about much is that, why be in a big hurry at all, is that there's only so many docking ports, and they need to there's other missions and supply ships that need to come up to be able to support the station. And so they've already had a couple months, and Boeing needs to leave. So the Boeing will undock, I think, on September 6th by itself. But you asked about physical consequences. I mean, I don't work there anymore, but they're studying the effect of being up there for a year. And I like the fact that all those studies really lead straight back to Earth, and that we lose bone up there if we do nothing about 10 times faster than a woman who's 70 years old and has osteoporosis. So what she loses in a year, I lose in a month. And it's significant. People were losing 1.5% of bone loss a month. So a 6-month mission, now they're 9% of your bones, 10%, and it depends where and everything. And so by doing those studies, we're learning a lot about the mechanism of osteoporosis. Is it that you don't keep building bone? Is it that you lose too much bone? I mean, what's the mechanism? It's a very complicated kind of thing. But so staying up there 8 months or another bunch of months, I don't think. I mean, there's always a risk being up there, and we're always learning more about it. I would imagine there's something that we've seen with people where their optic nerve ends up becoming distorted in shape, and it changes their vision. So the manifestation is it changes their vision. We have lots of little sets of glasses up there, so you can make sure you can see. But then, so what that indicates that's actually much more dangerous and very important to understand for future space travel is that you might have a swollen optic nerve. You're actually having swelling in your brain. And so they're doing a lot of measurements for that. I would imagine that Butch and Sunny, are some people it affects, some people it doesn't. It didn't affect me when I was up there. I do know Butch and Sunny, and those people are happier than you could believe to be up there. I mean, think of it this way. They went on a test mission. They were assigned to this test mission for years. Okay? That meant they're not going on missions. Their hand cannot be up because they're assigned to a mission that just never quite goes, right? And then when they go, they're going to stay up there for 8 days, which is as a person who's serving the mission, you can't whine that you only get to go to space for 8 days. But it is hard. On my Chandra mission, as amazing as that mission was, to go up there and come home 5 days later was you're like, what? We barely got changed out of our spacesuits and it's time to get home, right? Anyway, so the fact that they get to stay up and have a long duration mission, I think is actually really great. And it's really great for the outcome of the space station. Not every question would be this long, but it was something I really wanted to cover, and then we'll go fast on those slides. And so the fact that they're up there, I think they're really happy, but also by having 9 people up there instead of 7, they have just decimated the to-do list on the space station. And this is not just PR, but there's always tasks that you never quite get to, just like I never reorganize pretty much literally anything in my house. But I would be better off, and it would take me less time to pack if I would do those kinds of things.
Cady has a book, in case y'all don't know, called Sharing Space, and it's got the floofy hair picture on it. We will have copies. She will have copies. And after this panel, she'll be able to go out to the glass area out by the escalators and sign autographs, have longer discussion. We're so sorry about the technical issues. They were working earlier. I don't know. I leave for 15 minutes. I have no idea what happened after that. But anyway, these guys are outstanding at their jobs, so some magical gremlins must have gotten into the system. Anyway, so she'll be able to talk to you more about it afterwards. And then, of course, at 5:30, we have the Argo panel between Jonah Mendez and Jamie Ian Swiss. Please don't miss that one. That's going to be amazing.
The Soyuz bag. Okay.
You can talk about it if you like.
What's that? Okay. Well, so when we land in the Soyuz, which Scott Kelly described to us as like the best e-ticket ride ever, and so in it's a Soyuz, a small spacecraft for like three of us, right? And when we land with parachutes. And then, I don't know who they are, but there are people that go away with those parachutes, and sometimes they show up.
In messenger bag form.
In messenger bag form, yes!
On ThinkGeek 15 years ago.
International Space Station Soyuz TMA-3 mission. Awesome. So, my life depended on that. You know that.
I know. This is why you're going to sign it.
I am. Anyways, I think I did the finishing with Butch and Sunny. It's good that they're up there and they're getting a lot done, and it really changes basically the playing board for doing experiments up there, because a lot of the backlog of just crap that never gets done but is in the way is getting done, and so it's very great. I think the only thing I'm personally sad about is I haven't heard yet, but it sounds like 2 people will be removed from the mission that's going up, and I just, it's really hard. And a mission doesn't belong to you. We all serve at the pleasure of, the country, really. And but it is too bad for the people who were, their family, their friends, everybody had tickets, all those kinds of things. So, anyways, but eventually the thing about that's pretty wonderful is that eventually they will go. And like if the weather's crummy and mechanical things happen, all those kinds of things, it's terrible for the families and the friends, and they all call you and write you. But for the crew members, we know that when everything's right, we get to go. But I have a feeling a couple friends of mine are going to be sad. Okay, next question.
So aside from flat Earth, what's the most pervasive conspiracy theory that you do come across in your field? And if a proponent of that conspiracy was here, what would your appeal to them be?
Well, I was at an NPR event a couple months ago. And actually, when I told I did Alan Alda's podcast for the book. And he wanted me to tell him, he said, tell me something that surprised you recently. And I was like, well, I was at this NPR event, and I was choosing a book cover. And it was either this cover or another one. And I liked this one. And this young woman, probably 17 or so, said, I don't understand why you would take your picture, like, why would you take the picture for the cover of your book in a studio? Because it's clearly not out in space. And I looked at her and I said, because? She goes, well, because the Earth is not round. And I said, well, I lived up there for almost 6 months, and I'm telling you that I've looked out the Earth a lot, and it is absolutely round. There is no question in my mind. And I've been to space 3 times. It was round every time. And, if it wasn't argumentative, and, because she's, you want to save her, right? You want her to grow up with a wider view and doesn't have to yell at her or anything. And I just said, I would urge you to go learn things and look, go look at the arguments that people have that the Earth is round, and see if you agree with them, and go look at pictures and all those things. But go learn, go, see some things and explore with an open mind. That's what I would say to you. Anyways, but I said it in a more brief fashion, and the fact that this was at an NPR event, a flat Earth discussion, Alan Alda laughed really hard. That was really fun. I was very happy. Next.
Well, that kind of answered my question. I was gonna say, I'm a female from the South, and I work with the public, and I get a lot of backlash and criticism. Like it is phenomenal to me how many people think that the moon landing was fake, and the flat earthers and all that. I was kind of wondering how you approach those conversations, because I'm that person that likes to talk about it and wants to encourage people to, hey, this is, you need to do more research. I was just kind of curious how you approach those situations and what you tell people to do, and what resources you would suggest or something like that when we're believers are in those situations.
Sometimes I think that the reason people are so sure, like the moon thing, moon landing couldn't have happened, or that we don't really go to space, or all those things. And sometimes I think it's because it's so unbelievable. It takes a certain human optimism to say people did these things. It's like, could it really happen? And I think this is actually why when a space tragedy happens, when we lose a crew in space, I mean, the whole world is devastated. And I think it's because it takes away that hope that the impossible really is possible. And so I just try to share with them my knowledge, and just, I say, it did happen. And, I've talked to people who've done it, and I've seen pictures, and I've seen data, and I see, these kinds of things, and I, explain it. And so I explain my point of view, but kind of in a personal point of view. Like, John Young, walked on the moon. He comes to the, to the new astronaut class and teaches them. And this is a guy who says things like, shows the graph of the first ascent of the space shuttle. He goes, "Who knew that little thing would be so squirrely like that?" And he's he's a great guy. And actually, we were looking at ways to go back to the moon. And what would be the right way to go and stay, not just go to visit and come home, but stay. And they're, engineers at the Monday morning meeting of all the astronauts are talking about their latest kinds of things. And John Young leans over. He stands up. He goes, he said, "They are having you go to the moon. Every day you're going to be up in orbit. You were riding down in a moon buggy with a roll bar from orbit. It's a bad idea during Apollo. It's a bad idea now." These are real people with real opinions, and they're still, he's actually passed now, but he was still working there. But then a couple years ago, I went to a Steve Miller concert, and I'm trying to remember who did the warm-up. Maybe Peter Frampton? No, I don't know. Anyways, I forget who was the warm-up band, but in between, so the warm-up band does their thing, and then they're going to go ahead and set up for Steve Miller Band. And he has a backdrop that's got, like, the moon there. It's just like a big poster kind of image in the back. And then you have these technicians who are doing microphones and, setting everything. They're just getting the stage set. And I took a picture of this because I was like, see, the moon landing was faked. Here it was. I was like, no wonder people think this, Anyways, I just thought it was funny. Next.
So I've started seeing articles about the plans to decommission the ISS when it reaches the inevitable end of its life. So I'm kind of curious, whatever replaces it is built and sent up there, what realistic changes or additions would you most like to see to the new space station that the ISS doesn't currently have?
Well, I'll start blabbing and then I'll be thinking. Which is, when they talk about the decommissioning, in the past, I think they might be serious about 2030. I can't tell. But, for years now, if you've been listening, I flew on the space station in 2010, 2011. And then you'd hear things like, going to be done in 2018. And then Russia's not signed up for 2024. And when you think about, I knew that these were not actual, we're really going to stop having a space station. It's about the fact that our 16 international partners, the main ones being Canada, Japan, several countries in Europe, and the US and Russia. So those are the 5 sort of big partners. Each of them has to pick the right time to say, yes, we're going to support the space station through 2028. Or whatever the date, was. And it's not going to be probably during a such and such election time. So the fact that they go, Russia's not supporting a space station, or Europe is not intending to. It was all about, just be patient. It's all gonna work out. Everybody knows it's gonna work out, but it has to be done at the right time. You're making signs at me, Angie. Okay. Anyways, so I'm not sure 2030 is real. The big thing that the U.S. is trying to do, that NASA is trying to do, is they wanted to have a commercial space station. And they wanted to have what we do on the space station be done by companies instead of by the government. And where typically the government should do operations when they're the riskiest, when we just don't know. Like the first, Boeing flight. And, where there's a lot of uncertainties. And once we get so we know how to, like, for example, how to get supply ships up and down to the space station. I mean, it used to be a huge unknown. I myself captured the second supply ship. My friend Nicole Stott captured the first one. They were both Japanese. It had never been done from the space station because the space station is like huge. It's like the size of a factory, and the supply ship is the size of a bus. 16-ton bus. And so if something screws up, you can't move the factory. So you have to do it exactly right. So it's a big deal to do, whether you're doing it with a robotic arm, which we were, or whether now that we're better at it and understand more about it, they're actually coming in and undocking directly. So things change. Now that we know what we're doing with those things, now we can invite more people that can do this in a more efficient, sharp, slick way than the government can. So once it gets to be less risky and less known, it's time to bring in the government, and that's the same for doing science. And NASA took actually an early step to basically commission with Congress an organization whose job it was to get experiments up on the space station faster. I mean, it was taking like 7 years. Your university professor, she has a great idea. 7 years later, when her grad students are actually already gone, that experiment is going to space. And so they commissioned this organization, and their job was to be slick and to really handle these interfaces in ways the government couldn't. And they own half the crew time and half the up mass and half the down mass. So they really are in charge of half the stuff that's going on in the space station. And they made it so that even the government can do things in a more efficient way. So one of the reasons I think that 2030 might be real is that I think that they want companies to design new space stations and have this kind of work going on. And there's things like, are you going to make materials up there in space, or are you going to figure out how to make them in space and then come make them back home? And so it might be that there's going to be, plus, what's wrong with having space tourism, where people go up because they, have the means or get brought by a person in means up to space, and, having them live up in space, I think it's a great idea. So the main idea is to turn it over to the commercial partners. That was a really long way to say that, but I figure it's the Skeptics crowd and they like details. Okay, thank you.
Hey there again, sorry.
It's a friendly microphone.
So my question was actually kind of related to the last one, mainly. If, as an engineer myself, I was curious, with whatever replaces the ISS, what are some of the engineering challenges they might face other than, the international cooperation and the funding, but like things maybe if you wanted to address the bone density issue you were talking about earlier, if you were to be able to create a space station that would rotate at least in a section, you could have the artificial gravity for better management of that problem, but what are some of the engineering challenges you might see with a future space station?
Building in Windows, believe it or not. Like the engineers, and I don't mean you personally, of course, right? But it's a much simpler thing to build a space station with no windows, because they're complicated interfaces and they add risk. And yet, I think it's like practically criminal not to have a human presence up there, a way of, just experiencing the view. And so having more, some of we don't even get to go to some of the windows because there's special experiment cameras in those windows, so you can't even go and look out them because they're all closed up. So I think having more ways to interact with the Earth itself, especially in this time of climate change and trying to understand, both take data and be more aware of it. Even something simple like, cleaning the air, figuring out better mechanisms to do that aren't as energy intensive. And spacesuits is a really big thing. The reason they didn't change the U.S. spacesuits for so many years, like a zillion years, is that they work. They already work. They operate. They can keep people safe. And so when you design a whole new spacesuit, you're going to have to certify it. And it's really expensive and hard to do. And yet they don't fit everyone. And they also don't work the way we need them to for the moon or for being up on an outpost like the Gateway. So figuring out how to prototype things more easily and make them, and figure out whether you want to then invest in retooling a factory to make them, I think would be really good too. Hello.
Hi.
Angie. Does anybody call you Angela?
Well, that's my government name.
So
You're that agent.
I'm kind of going by Dr. Angie. Whatever. I don't
like
care. You can call me anything. I love you. So I have two questions. Number one, what is NASA's position regarding Buzz Aldrin's punching that dude in the face for challenging the moon landing, if you know? And number two, tell us about the time you robbed a bank.
Oh, thank you. We spent a couple hours in a convertible this morning, along with Celestia. It was the Barbie mobile. This was a pink Porsche. It was delicious, and so were we, right? We were pretty fabulous. I'm just gonna say, people waved back. Actually, I walked up to the height, and all sorts of people yelled. It's very fun. I'm like, oh, okay. I'm undercover. What was the first one, Angie?
What did NASA think about?
Oh, Buzz Aldrin. I know. I disregarded your question because I didn't like it. Well, I don't know what NASA thinks of that, but I think there are some comparisons to you don't get to pick your relatives, do you? Okay? And they all bring something, and, and they are who they are, and as they, anyways, I'm sure they have no position in that. And we're all different. We'll all have different personalities, and they've made them all like me and Angie. First, we get a lot done for a long time, but eventually it'd be good to bring in people who are different than us, even the Buzzes, And of course, certainly I respect what he did in the past. And then robbing a bank. My husband was on the board of a bank, and a local bank. And one of the things they do every couple of years is they actually get one, person or family or whatever to go around to the 5 different branches. I live in western Massachusetts, about 2 hours west of Boston, hour north of Hartford. So it's in the country. It's like 55 miles to the airport and 2 stoplights for me. And still there's traffic, but so my husband volunteered our family to rob the banks, and our kid was 12 at the time. And what you do is you go in and you hand them, this package that says very clearly, this is a mock robbery, and we'd like you to do the things you're supposed to do. Because it's a drill, and you may know all the things you're going to do, and it's interesting to me in a simulation kind of way. This is why we practice at NASA, is that you can know how to do the procedure, and you go, yeah, of course, that's what I do. But then when it's really time, then you're nervous. The fact that there really might be a fire or something dangerous going on, it changes your ability to carry that out. And you have to understand what you're going to do when you're stressed like that. And some of when we do our emergency procedures, really? Wow. When we do our emergency procedures, then we're being graded. People are watching, and that can kind of add that pressure. And then we learn the mistakes that you might make. And so that's what they're asking people at the bank to do. And so we went, first as a family, we went out and gave them an envelope, and they look, and they do things, if any of you are into robbing banks. Like in a bank, you'll notice there's like pictures by the doors, where they'll say, was the person who robbed the bank taller or shorter than that picture? There's all sorts, and they have all sorts of things they have to do. And then, but there's 5 banks, we got pretty good at it. My husband did one, I did one, and we did one as a family. And by the time we got to the last one, our 12-year-old robbed the bank by himself. And he walked in, and the woman said to him, saying, would you like a lollipop? He goes, no, I'd like to rob the bank. Wow. Okay. So, thank you. Hey, can we just have a hand for the AV team? It's really hard, and I'm not sure what was, going on with Mr. Computer. What's that? We'll worry about it later. Yep. Thank you. Do I do this one? Okay, I'm used to it. Okay. So I will be here. And tell you what, why don't you guys save your questions, but then come right back up. Okay? Okay. And why don't I'm going to just flop through some slides kind of quickly. And then have you, so you can kind of just see, we've been talking about some of this stuff, and I'll just kind of ramble a little bit here. We've been talking about my STS-93 flight. There's Chandra. We brought the first high definition camera. This is not taken by a camera, but taken by Chandra, actually imaging a black hole. And actually, I spoke wrong. Chandra didn't actually do the imaging. This is really marching along smartly by itself, which is a little unnerving. But anyway, so that telescope was supposed to work for 5 years. It's now working for 25. I know. And there is now a threat to cancel it with no replacement in sight, which I think, I mean, literally everything that you know, all of us, has, Chandra knowledge as a major part of how we understand those things. And so I think I don't know. I would like to keep it around. It's not costing very much. I feel like if we could just know facts and compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges, things might look different. If you're curious, I would go to savechandra.org, and I think you can listen to what some of the scientists are saying, and I would do that. I've been meaning to. And so the space station, that's where I lived. I mean, I really loved it up there. I went as part of a crew of 3. And I tell people this is us really excited about going to space, all of us. And I say this because the real deal is that, I'm going with Paolo Nespoli from Italy, gregarious guy, and then not as gregarious guy by far, right? And he knows I say this, Dmitry Kodatev. And, and so it turns out that this is actually a picture of Dmitry excited about going to space. And he knows that I say this. And what I had to realize is that when I go to Dmitry and say, hey, Dima, we should be doing this, and with my big idea, and the face looks back at me, I am easily discouraged in this respect. I'm not making a joke. I mean, I would be easily discouraged. So I have to just literally pretend that I am getting encouraging nodding and smiling from Dima, right? I mean, but if this is what you might have to really change the way you think about your perspective on how someone responds. There's a person that I deal with at my publisher who's just very, very short, curt. I mean, the emails are like, and I'm like, what about context? Could I have a few words? A few words of context. And then I talk to her on Zoom, and I'm like, I love this woman. And, it turns out she's just a machine. And like, okay, this opportunity here, what do you want to do? Can you do this? And so sometimes you need to learn to listen to people differently because you have to think about why you feel the way you feel. And anyways, it was interesting for me. This is the Soyuz for coming home. We were talking about how it's a really wild ride and that's slowing down that 300 miles an hour just a little bit. In the case that the Boeing is in 2 pieces, this is in 3 pieces, but basically it's set up that we are sitting in the piece in the middle. That's the capsule, the descent module. And this is the Soyuz that I came home in. And then on either end, as soon as we do that deorbit burn, we're going to kick those parts off. And then we're going to start coming through the atmosphere. And Scott described, you always get the person who's already been to space, or has gone home, then reminds you what coming home might look like. And he goes, okay, pieces of burning spacecraft will pass by the windows. Seems, thank you. And he's like, and of course, we know this is okay, but it's just really not going to feel okay? And because the Soyuz is built, they're built with that sort of a blader, meaning this is stuff that's supposed to burn up, just enough of it to keep the capsule from getting too hot, but not so much of it that the capsule gets too hot. And so looking at that, and then he talks about, when we get closer and closer and closer, now, what the big thing, Cady, after all the burning and everything is done, is that we're going to have parachute opening shock, where you are just going so fast, and then those chutes come out, and even the drogue chute, the first chute that kind of leads the other one out, is just this big, it's like the capsule suddenly standing still, which of course it's not. It's just such a big difference. And he looks right at me and he's like, Cady, you do not want to be talking at this time. He said, you will bite your tongue. Set a timer. Don't be talking. Anyways, I had a few slides from Boeing, but of course we talked about it. This was the first crew that was assigned to the Boeing capsule, and they've actually now they were then replaced by Sunny and Butch because it took a long time. These are the 2 people. Does the word stranded apply to this picture? Please say no. They're so capable and so excellent, and this is them in space there coming out of the capsule. And this is Sunny from a former mission explaining about food and stuff, and it's very fun. Anyway, she's really great. And this is the 9 of them up there. Sunny and Butcher in blue. And I've had several people at the con ask me, like, hey, aren't there more people in space? Not just 2? Why do people always talk about 2? And again, think of what the media is doing. And they're not bad people. I mean, I work with them. It's more, you don't always get the whole picture. And there are 9 people on this space station. And they're amazing. I mean, so look up there, and we have a couple of Russians. And up in the top there is a really good friend of mine, Jeanette Apps. And then in the middle there is Tracy Caldwell-Dyson, who's the person that redesigned spacewalking training from a sort of she basically is the one who addressed this elephant in the room. She came home and she said, we're astronauts. You teach us everything we need to know, except spacewalking. You kind of throw us in the pool and figure that the ones who can really do it will do. And it's a fairly judgmental kind of deal, right? And she said, we need to teach people. I mean, really, the first things you would do would actually be quite hard. You'd be trying to manage buoyancy and doing this and doing that. And now they're doing things like they're putting people for their very first run. They're on the robotic arm. So they're not floating anywhere, right, in the water, in our pool where we practice. They're on the robotic arm, and they get to pick up a drill and see what does it feel like, or like it's basically a big screwdriver. Whenever it hits the hard stop, can you react to that force? What does it feel like to use the tools when you're not using them out in front of you? Which, I mean, this really takes a lot of muscle to do this, even in the pool, right? So they really have changed. Tracy is responsible for changing the spacewalk training, and everyone is qualifying now. And it's not because the spacesuit is easier, it's because everybody has a different attitude and a different way in teaching in a more, how do you need to learn, how can we teach you kind of way. So I really admire her for that. And on the right there in the middle is Mike Barrett, and you'll actually see another picture of him. He is a flight doctor. His wife is a pediatrician. They have 5 kids, and he still manages to write books and do homework with his kids. He taught me how to do homework with my kid from Russia, from the space station. We would do math homework over the phone. So anyways, there's all these different personalities, and I don't know these particular Russian folks that are up there, but I really love the Russians that we were with. And there's the space station. You see the shuttle on the left. And this is I know these skeptic people like to know things, specific things, and one of them, I'm really proud of this picture because our crew took this, Paul and Esmely took this picture. Every time we've left the space station, like in the space shuttle you leave, but then you can't take a picture of the shuttle in the station. And when we leave in the Soyuz, the shuttle isn't there because if you have to come back, if something happens and you have to reattach yourself, what if you bang into the space station and with that big shuttle in the end, in the movies this would happen, the space station would break apart, and we'd lose some good guys, but not all of them, all those things. But anyways, so it's not certified for loads with the shuttle hanging off of it, but we came at the end of the shuttle program, and people realized we need a picture of this to remind us of these really hard things that we did. And you see all these patches and logos and badges and ribbons that I see at DragonCon. It's a little bit of the same thing. You're reminding people of things that are important to you, Anyways, but the space station is big. I'll show you this a 1.5 minute video. And why don't I talk for about 3 or 4 more minutes. We'll flop through some more slides. And let me just think if I want to show you any particular slides. This is us taking off in the middle of the winter in December in Russia. And I'm in the Soyuz, I'm waving. And then we come in for docking. And so this is the front of our capsule, docking. And then this is my favorite part of the movie, because that's what we do all the time, is we fly from place to place. So it's this floating idea is great, but look where I'm tucking my feet in to stay in one place. Our kitchen table, Paolo had this idea. The kitchen table didn't have to be horizontal. When you think about it, why does it have to be horizontal? Doesn't matter. But if it's up against the wall flat, then we don't really have a place to gather and feel like we're eating together, and that's important too. A place to kind of hang sometimes, or even individually meet, have coffee. So it's really interesting that one person's view, and he's a very visual guy, Paolo is. But there you can see Orion going by in the sky, and this is actually Aurora Australis. And all these lights are city lights. When you see little flashy ones, those are lightning. You see the atmosphere, the very, very thin layer there. And this is sped up, and it used to bother me a lot, but it's really sped up from the way we actually do these things. And I talk about teamwork and how we're really groups of 6, but we really are kind of groups of 3 adding into another group of 3, and then they go home and another one comes. So you have to really learn a lot about teamwork and how to become this crew that actually, look at that. Do you see? That's Dimitri smiling, right? This is a crew that did not look like they were going to be gelled, and I think the fact that the mission is so important and is so clear to you up there helps us figure out, even things like this. And so, how do we become that crew? I think one thing is to notice each other. It is so easy for all of us to stereotype and have bias. We are humans. We have, points of view, and a point of view can also be biased. And I know that I did not choose my lab partner in chemistry at MIT because she was a transfer student. She looked like Miss California. And I'm like, oh, I don't even know if she's smart. I did that, okay? I did that. She knows. It's in the book. But, and then she looked over, and apparently she was like, nobody that cute could do chemistry. So she's a MacArthur Fellow. She's like a world-famous chemist person back at MIT, leading a big lab, and, was Wisconsin for a long time. And I had a pretty cool job. So were we wrong? We were so wrong, right? And how many people have I not met? Because I were not interacted with, because I made some judgments. And in this picture, even, President Obama and I stand out because, we just do. We're like the only ones that look kind of different there, right? And I don't put us on the same level, honest. But anyways, you look at the twins, the identical twins. I flew with both of them in space, and they may be identical in looks, but they're very different people. And so in that picture is actually 7 very different people. And we get a chance to figure that out a little bit as people by going on some very cool, amazing training exercises that always serve some kind of constructive purpose too. I went meteorite hunting in Antarctica, and I am not a camping girl. There were 4 of us, and I learned a lot about myself and what I might be like on a long mission. And if there were challenges with the people, I really learned a lot. I lived underwater for 11 days. My dad was a deep sea diver, and he ran experimental diving for the Navy. And he was quite ill, but not the kind of guy that wanted anybody to know that, who he used to work for. So getting to do this mission before he passed was very, very cool. We're only in about 60 feet of water off the coast of Florida, but it was almost as cool as space. You look out the window and you see like the food chain in action, and it just was so amazing. And we're practicing for different space things, and the neighbors are pretty interesting. I don't know, it was really pretty cool. And then you'll see Mike Barrett here on the right. Grocery shopping with Mike Barrett. I learned things. Not only did I learn homework things, but we're going to have an 11-day mission. There are 6 of us. We go to the grocery store. He goes, okay, you pull one cart. You pull one cart. I'm going to pull one cart, you're going to push one cart, and just make it so I have access to both carts. And we're literally going through the grocery store, and he is just grabbing things off the shelf and throwing them in the back of him in the cart, and in the different carts. And he's feeding 5 kids at home. This man, the things this man could do with ramen are astonishing, okay? So it was a good underwater buddy to have. And anyways, I think I often show these pictures of Katherine Johnson because she was very, very, very belatedly honored for the work that she did at NASA in terms of understanding how to get people and stuff off into space safely and then back home safely as well. And I urge you to go see Hidden Figures if you've never seen it, because I think that it's called Hidden Figures, and clearly there is nothing hidden about this woman, but we did not see her. So I'm going to take questions, and I'm going to kind of just flop through my slides while you guys are coming up to the mic and just see. I'm just going to sort of show you things, kind of, some of my favorite pictures of people. Because that's 2 different Scotts, right? Robot on the left, and there's Scott. And, this is Scott who just found the big slingshot, and then we all take different pictures throughout outside our windows, when we can see. And this is about changing. I will show this one thing, and then I promise, to my audiovisual savior, I will answer his question. But, it's a funny thing. We're just used to looking at things one way, and it's easy to do that. And we're not used to looking at the people, and so if you kind of look upside down, now, I don't even think you see Dima really until you go like this. You see me because I have big hair. But now here, the 3 of us, it's really, you can really see us. Right? And you actually see up on the top there, you see Ron. I don't know if you saw Ron here. Right? So it's really interesting. You just have to learn to look at things a different way. If you want a different result, approach it from a different angle, and that means whether you are the skeptic trying to find out more or the person who is pretty sure that something unscientific is correct. I think looking from a different perspective is the way. So, John, what's your question? It's John, right? Mark, okay. Sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm bad.
You've flown on both Soyuz and the shuttle launch vehicles, correct?
Correct.
How would you compare the two? Are they on par with each other? Is one a significant generation better than the other? Or, just what were your thoughts on the comparison of the two?
I mean, for me, it's like the taxi. I didn't care. Taxi, Uber, Lyft, somebody saying, do you want to ride? I mean, I would go, right? Because to me, it's not so much about, it's 8.5 minutes is ascent. What I did really love, so I think of the Soyuz is kind of small and compact. I mean, the rocket is compact. You just feel you feel every single bit of that thrust in your butt. You really feel that because it's a smaller vehicle. And in the shuttle, I mean, it's clear that you're in a cabin, but you're part of this giant system of the boosters and then this, and even the shuttle itself is just so big, right? So it's kind of cool to be in a smaller spacecraft. And then these days, they dock from the Soyuz. They dock within a couple hours with the space station because we've learned more about how people feel and do they feel well enough and stuff like that. And it turns out, we didn't know that when I was flying, and so we would take about 2 days to make sure everybody felt well enough to do this really critical phase of docking with the space station. So for 2 days, Dima and Paolo and I are in a little tiny capsule orbiting the Earth, just the three of us. And it is the most priceless memory for me, and often, one or two of us would be sleeping. We were all tired and stuff, and, so you'd really get to be kind of alone. So it's really special. But I will say the Russian stuff can seem kind of basic. And the Russians have a valve that's going to let pressure out when they want to let pressure in. They just turn it backwards. They know how to maintain it. They know how to make it repeatedly and without errors. So it's really sturdy, right? Whereas we made a atmospheric, how much oxygen and this and that and everything are you seeing in the air in the space station? And this thing, it's the Cadillac. It could tell you everything, except often it can't tell you anything. So, to each their own, right? They're both valuable, and I think we all learn from each other. Next.
Hi. So a lot of lore and ghost stories and things like that are from people having experiences that they can't necessarily explain. Do you have any very unique experiences that you have had in space that I'm not going to say is ghost stories lore, but just is unexplainable that science hasn't yet gotten there yet?
I'm a funny one. I might have told this audience. I don't think so though. That on my last mission, the shuttle came up. So they were there, they're working, and we're on different schedules. And I wake up in the morning, and I was like, oh yeah, people are banging on the roof. I'm like, ooh, not supposed to happen that way, banging on the roof. Not a good sign. And there's a little, all this thinking happens, pretty quickly. And I'm like, oh, that's right. The 134 guys are here, and they started their spacewalk while we're still sleeping. So anyway, so there was that. No, I think that there's so much to learn from just being up there, and I really love the experiment aspect of doing things. And data. You think data is this thing that's going to be a 1 or a 0, but data is just more info, and we're learning a lot about a lot of processes. And the ones that seem to be the most interesting are biological. I would say that we just don't know. It used to be when we brought things up in the shuttle and early in the station, you had to pretty much know you're going to learn something important, which means you kind of know how it's going to end, right? But then in all the years we've been doing experiments up there, we're now at the point where it's hey, we should try. Okay, we have a big serious problem, how to test cancer drugs, and understand whether they're working effectively or not. And it takes 6 weeks to do that. I'm not looking.
I'll tell you in a second.
Okay.
All right. Hey, I'm willing to give y'all another 10 minutes.
Okay.
Are y'all interested? Okay. Just remember, the Argo panel has to start at 5:30, So, and Cady needs to have her time with y'all out at the table. So, you want to go another 10 minutes?
Sure. Should we do
10 minutes?
questions?
Yes,
Yeah?
absolutely.
Okay.
If you're comfortable with that. Okay.
Okay.
All right, we'll do it.
And I know some people have to go. I'll just do the selling thing really quick. I mean, just because it's like my job now. But I mean, I think some people will want a book, and that's great. If you don't want to take it home, or if you're somebody who doesn't get a book because we run out or whatever, you can just go to my website, cadycoleman.com, and you will see that there are autographed books that are more money than the book costs. Just write something in the notes about DragonCon, or put in the code SpaceFriend, okay? And we'll make sure that your book costs the same amount of money, probably a couple dollars in shipping, not the 10 that it says. I mean, we'll refund you, whatever. Anyways, but if you say SpaceFriend, it will make it so it costs the cover value of the book. I do that not because I don't want to be charging for my autograph, but more I don't want to compete with the booksellers. And so I'm only doing that for autographed books. Like, I won't sell somebody a book that isn't autographed because I want them to buy that from a bookseller. Anyways, so go to my website, cadycoleman.com. There's a thing you can push for autographed books. Don't push personalized, just push autographed. But then in the notes, tell me what you want me to say, or tell me your name, say to Harry or Harriet or whatever. Anyways, so you can do that if there's not books to be had. And the book will be around a long time. So, and there's also an audio book. I narrate it, and the Ian Anderson duet is actually on there. So, next.
So a lot of astronauts say that learning Russian is the hardest thing that they have to do in training. And I was wondering how you found the experience of learning Russian and then having to operate with it on the Soyuz.
I loved learning Russian, and I have a certain sort of little ease with languages and stuff, and so I liked going over there, and I actually had a crash course where they moved up my training by like 8 months or something, and I was like, you mean it's going to be like next November? They're like, no, this November, and they said, basically on January 3rd, you're going to have survival training with 2 cosmonauts that don't speak English, so if you want to have your intensive Russian in Russia, you need to leave next week. And they're like, okay, now you're going to do Russian, 5 days a week. I'm like, I need Russian 7 days a week. And so we did that, and I would go to, like, if any of you have ever been to Russia, they have a market called Izmailova. Anybody know that market? It's a place where there's all sorts of, it's a big, giant, vast flea market. And I asked these guys there, I said, hey, where did you get your tea? And I learned how to say things like, what if I want to buy 2 of those? And, those kinds of, and so you're just talking to people. And they go, well, you watch the stand, we'll go get you tea. And these became my, buddies that I went to Izmailova, and I would help sell. There was, seashells and, things that looked like giant sapphire crystals, which, of course, are not, but are cool gems. And so I really loved languages, and I like to make the mission work, and I think that when you fly with people with a different language, when they really want to tell you how they are, they're going to want to tell you in their language some. So I just think it's a way to blend. But it also happens to be pretty easy for me.
Hi.
Hello.
So I grew up with a mom whose dream was to become an astronaut. She actually became a preschool teacher, and her theme currently in her classroom is space and space exploration.
Cool.
So when I told her
when
I told her that I was coming to a panel hosted by an astronaut, she lost her mind. And she had 2 questions for her classroom.
Okay.
The class asked, first, what do you do when you're bored in space? And how do you become an astronaut? What would you do if you were 4 and 5 years old to prep yourself for this?
So, I'm just not really bored anywhere. And certainly not bored in space, but I think you bring things with you when you want to just feel a certain way. And I brought flutes with me. I also talked to my family. I talked to my friends, my girlfriends. I don't know. So there was just really, it is actually it's so busy. Like, people are like, oh, what are Butch and Sunny doing? I mean, if I went again, I would sleep more. I would. I mean, that I am a late night person. I kind of need that time alone. It's not the best way to do it, And so, just staying up too late. And I just think that sleep actually is underrated. And I'm feeling. I'm trying to encourage all the college students to sleep more because I think, you'd be smarter and stuff. Anyway, so tell them to sleep more, take naps, right? Naps are good for preschool. And what they should do, they should find out about everything they're curious about, and they should realize that every adult on the planet, it is actually their charter to answer the tugging of the sleeve that happens and answer those questions. And so I would encourage them to ask questions. And I really see when I go out and talk to schools, I can tell the difference when it's that kind of like, what are your questions? What do you want to know? What do you think we need to do next? I can tell that when kids have been taught that way.
Well, thank you from Cheryl's pre-K class.
Thank you.
So, I'm kind of tall, so.
Oh.
So, that works.
How does it know?
So, it seems like technology's advanced to a point where free enterprise companies such as SpaceX, Blue Origin, and Virgin Galactic are kind of encroaching on territory that, historically speaking, has been reserved for NASA. And so, given that, I guess I have two questions for you. One, how is that impacting NASA? And two, given this development, how do you think NASA should change its budgetary obligations and priorities?
Oh, I don't think I even want to look at the last question, actually. But I think that, from what I understand, I don't work there anymore, but they really wanted this commercialization to happen because it's the right thing to do. Like, we've already established how to get up and down to low Earth orbit, and the government has no business doing it their slow way that is just not as nimble. And what I see coming from these commercial companies is that no one is going to be able to take human life lightly or make decisions. And if you noticed, I was really pleased to hear about the NASA discussions with Boeing and with their own engineers, from what I understand from knowing some of the people, talking with some of the people here lately, it's really true that they're just trying to make sure that voices are heard, voices that are not always heard, especially voices of dissent, right? That they are embraced and encouraged. So the fact that these companies like SpaceX, when they can take bigger steps forward than the government can, and take risk with hardware, not with people, but with hardware. And by doing that, it's not something the U.S. can do or the government can do, because people are going to be, wait a minute, why didn't you send that up and it was blew up and it didn't, this? And yet when SpaceX or other companies take this leap ahead, they actually bring everybody with them. And the other thing I'll encourage you to just remember is that, these companies are actually, they're getting government money. The government is funding these missions, right? It may be operated by SpaceX, and we have to learn how to get along with a different culture and different cultures of the different organizations and countries. But still, a lot of it is U.S. money, and so the budget question is actually pretty complicated. But I would urge all of you to go to savechandra.org and see what you see when you read. Because I think it's hard you think you could just know what the facts are, but I think it's hard to know. Is it time?
I'm so sorry.
Well,
I'm so sorry. This has been so great. You were magnificent. Thank you so much. Come on, keep it going. Yay! Yes. Thank you. Yay, space.
Thank you, and yay, Mark and team, for making it work.
Thank you so much, Mark. I know this was hard.
Yeah.
So, y'all
yay, space. That's
yay,
our
space.
sign today. Okay.
She took it out of Barbie's hand.
I did not. She gave it to me.
Yep. Okay. All right. Anyway, so
it was heavy.
Yes, it was. It was. Thank you so much for being here. Thank y'all so much for being here. Please join us again for Argo. We do have to vacate the room and then redo. We love all of you. Thank you so much.